we've got the macro, but when it comes down to institutions, to schools, and to the regional systems, perhaps having to think through how do they come out of this. The government is going to set directions for the nation, no doubt, about how do we exit out of this phase. But then it comes down to every organisation, ultimately every, using the terminology of classroom, but every class teacher is going to have to think through how do they bring their kids out of that. So at every level, what should we have in mind when we're resuming life in the
on the other side?
On the other side, yes.
It isn't quite the other side, is it? Again, because it's going to be a slope.
Yes.
And please, let's not say the new normal. Let's also not talk about the crisis being an opportunity. I mean, the cliches, you have to hack your way through them at the moment, don't you?
I do. Okay, I do like Will Richardson. He says no normal. So it gets rid of the new normal, because there will be no normal. It'll all be different.
It won't all be different. It won't all be different.
It'll be different.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I do sense around is that because of all the turbulence, is that there are lots of parents I know who can't wait for their kids to get back to school and just get, we might talk idealistically about parents being the primary educators, the first educators, the co-educators. But for many parents, they want the schools to get back onto it, and to relieve them of the burden. I mean, they do. They've got enough on in their lives. They want to support, but they do not see themselves as the kind of, absolute co-educator partners, as we sometimes, I think, idealistically would hope them to be. They want to get back to, firstly, their own interests and pursuits as adults, but also, earning a living that will keep their family both fed and all the aspirations that they have for them. So I think there'll be a strong impulse for the system to rebound back to what people know. There always is. You mentioned Christchurch earlier, and I was part of conversations back after the earthquake when people were saying, this is our opportunity. We're not going to rebuild schools exactly as they were. We're going to do something completely different. And they asked people what they wanted. What do you think people wanted?
As it was.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So let's just hold that in mind. But that's not to say that things won't have changed. I think a huge amount will have changed, and I'll come on to a couple of things that I'm observing on that. First thing I want to say, though, about government action on this is that whilst I've been always, a bit sort of thumb and forefinger about schools having the custodial function, and some people call it the babysitting function, it is a vital element of the way our societies work, and probably will work for the rest of our lifetimes. I don't know about beyond that, because since I'm a big supporter of schools, I think it's really important that kids get out of their family nexus, their family context, and experience a different kind of community, and come together with humans from very different kinds of circumstances and make community with them. I think that's fundamentally important. So I'm a huge supporter of schools. I'm not in favour of seeing deschooling, homeschooling, all of that stuff for me has huge dangers. And anyway, that's another big discussion. But in terms of the economy, and I say the irony around my acknowledging the need that that all societies have for schools to enable their parents to work, I just want to say that doesn't necessarily mean that I would be hoping for GDP to go back to where it was, extractive capitalism to carry on unabated. Some people are talking about this as the great pause. And if there is a reassessment of some of our objectives, then it could be around what people are talking about as a shift from, excuse me, the old classical economics towards a very different view of what is economically valuable. And a new generation of economists is really pursuing this. I mean, for example, in the news last week, Amsterdam have embraced the thinking of Kate Raworth, whose work on donut economics. I don't know if you know it. In fact, it's here. Yeah, here it is. Your listeners, if you haven't read this book, this is a significantly important book. I find it all the time. Her view about how economies could be thought of as a donut, which is a sweet spot, really, between ensuring that everybody in the society has their basic needs met without overstepping, this is the outer ring of the donut, the resources of the planet, is really powerful. And Amsterdam, all their politicians have read this and are adopting that as their way forward. Equally, New Zealand, of course, is looking at economics for well-being. So getting the economy back to working doesn't necessarily mean back to the old model of destroying the planet, which, by the way, can I just add in parenthesis, we talk about this as an unprecedented crisis. It's not. It's just unprecedented in our lifetime. There have been plenty of precedents. Bubonic plague, cholera, the Black Death, Spanish flu, of course. All of them have delivered huge shocks to society. Society moves on. I argue that there are a series of shifts coming which are literally unprecedented in the life of Homo sapiens. And of course, the climate crisis is not going away. We've got the planet having a breather at the moment, but unless we shift our economics, we're back into that trajectory. So my point about all that is, it's perfectly understandable, and I support the need for schools to take up again the role of caring for children during the day, using time differently potentially, whilst adults can involve themselves, hopefully in the green economy, or hopefully in artistic activity, all kinds of things which enable us to enjoy some level of, if not prosperity, at least having everybody's basic needs met. So that's point one. I'm perfectly happy to be part of what's now being called the Build Back Better movement. Let's build back better, absolutely fine. But to imagine that education systems will seize this opportunity to revolutionize is fantasy. They won't. And by the way, I never see, do you, the best political brains exercising themselves about education policy. They're elsewhere.
Yes, yeah. I think more than ever, they're elsewhere at the moment because they have to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then that means it's down to system level leaders at the school level and practitioners to be making the gains where we can. And I think for myself, those gains are starting to come out of the fog, really. One is, as you say, noticing that the whole world doesn't come to a grinding halt when tests don't happen. And, you know, and the saving is enormous. So I think there's an opportunity here to think how we develop that narrative and how we press home that advantage. The very last thing that schools should be doing is going back and saying, now we've got to make up for lost time, we've got to cram really hard so that you can get your GCSEs next year to the same level. I think we've got to be smart about how we handle that, but the whole test / very different assessment system is a kind of a weak spot that I think perhaps we can exploit at this stage. Maybe we can talk about that a bit later. The thing I really want to say, I suppose, and this is the thing that's exercising me most, because I'm trying to write about it in a different part of the forest, is what is distinctive about coming together physically in schools, in institutions? If we know now how much can be achieved online, the richness of the resources that are online, and by the way, the whole kind of struggle about restricting screen time is pretty much dead. Screens won. You know, kids are inhabiting this environment big time. Do you seriously think that you can drag them out of it and shut the door? Seriously? And why would you? But the question, more importantly, is if we place value on schools where we come together physically, what is the huge value that we need to optimize in that and in terms of the use of our time? What can be done online should be done online. Fine. But there are things about person-to-person contact, coming together in groupings. It's easy to say, oh, collaboration, which can be well done or really badly done. But some of the things that occur to me around that is that, for a start, enabling young people to be in arts performance, in creating performance together and the creation of that, enabling young people to work on physical well-being, call it physical education, call it physical training, call it fitness, call it wellness, call it team sports, if you like, which are hugely important and valuable. All of those things that require us to come together physically. Finding identity, actually, in the day-to-day interplay between people. And I think experiencing collective entrepreneurialism, putting together joint projects together, which actually do require face-to-face action, and the interplay of understanding body language and everything that's involved over being with someone over the course of a day, as opposed to the intensity of a Zoom hour, which is very different. Now, just to finish that point, Stephen, where I invite you to come in, I think schools need to think hard now about their use of time. 9 to 4, 9 to 3, really? Okay. How do you use the online resources now, and how do you optimize the preciousness of being together in the same room? We might talk differently about the transition and how we get there, because of course it's going to be a very difficult, possibly end of 2020, before people come back in, fully into school environments. But we ought to be thinking about that and planning for it, I hope, in ways that are imaginative and which really zone in on what is distinctive and precious about the school as a physical environment and as an institution. And I think we need institutions probably more than ever.
Yeah, well, you've touched on a lot of very, very deep areas, which would be as close to my heart as to your heart as well. I think, how do we encourage the schools, the institutions, to have that deep look at what's important? It's quite obvious now that the kids aren't rushing back to school, or if they want to get back to school, it's not for the tests or sitting in the classroom. They want to come back to talk to each other and to simply be free and be out in nature or wherever else they can be. How do we encourage organisations, institutions to now think through at a deep level, what is it that they should do with their time? I'm totally with you on that one, because there is so much that can be proven to be done elsewhere. So that what's important in the coming together for me would be that creativity, as you've talked about, whether the creativity is in increased time in the arts or entrepreneurship or whatever it looks like in that organisation. But for me, that first step that we're going to have to encourage people to see the importance of is to say, what is it that the kids have missed? What is it that they actually deeply need?
Totally. And so my starting point would be to suggest that every school has a really, not a quick, sort of half hour when they first come back, but an extended inquiry about what kids have missed. What was it that was important? What was it that you valued over this time not being in school? What was good about that? And how can we now, going forward, make together a joint experience which brings together the best of both of those worlds? Because life is short and fragile and vulnerable, and we want to make the best of this experience together. So let's design it in a way that we can. So I think asking them and making sure that every kid's voice is heard on that is really, really important. And that needs to be a sensitive process over time. It needs to be well designed, to come back to the old design motif, and could be incredibly powerful in terms of enabling schools as complete communities to come up with a different design for them.
Yeah, and I guess if we wanted to round off this conversation now, we go back to your book on Thrive. If communities are able to place that as the question, to say, how is it that we're going to thrive into the future as we move out of this time frame, as we move out of this experience, people have to be thinking on multiple levels. They have to all be on their radar going through. And I guess the encouragement from people like ourselves is that we can speak into those contexts and encourage people to ask the right questions and to not get sidetracked into what some in the community will see as important. And we know that some in the community will be panicking about, my kids haven't learnt their times tables, or they haven't done this, or they haven't done that. So we've got to be able to get at every level people to just take that deep breath and say, there's a bigger picture here. This pause that we've all been given has given us the opportunity to ask those questions, because I completely agree with you that the wider environment has a pause, but the problems haven't gone. So that it's given us that chance. So look, thank you very much, for the dialogue today, and I think there's much that you've covered that's really, really helpful for people to think through. Yeah, so thank you for the dialogue, the conversation, and I'm looking forward to further conversations.
Me too, Stephen. Thanks a lot. Good luck to everybody out there.